Coming up today on Locked On at Texas Tech, Zach Kittley's bevy of offensive weapons and how he fits those pieces together. And we hear from one of the most intriguing of the options added to the Red Raider offense this year.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you, wrapping up a week that included a fall camp kickoff. We're into it now, baby. And we spent a little time yesterday hearing from defensive coordinator Tim DeRuyter and talking about that Red Raider defense with some new names in the mix with new opportunity in front of them. Check out that episode if you were not with us yesterday. Today, want to flip to the other side of the line of scrimmage and get into some of what's happening with the offense under Zach Kittley once again. I want to get into specifically one of the most intriguing guys on the offensive side of the football, and there is a list of them to consider, but Jalen Conyers is one we'll hear from today and consider what type of impact he may make for the Red Raiders. But first, let's take a listen to offensive coordinator Zach Kittley talking about a bevy of options and how you go about sort of fitting these pieces into place and distributing the touches as we get into the fall. Here is Zach Kittley.
It's going to be a task. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. We got a lot of very talented, skilled players, and we got to find different ways to package personnels, package formations, and try to do our best to, get that ball, in everybody's hands a little bit. There is still one ball that goes around, and so again, it's going to probably differ a little bit week to week based off what the defense has given us, but we got a good idea of how we're going to try to package some guys and move some guys around to try to get the ball in their hands and, get them into some priority matchups and some stuff like that.
Chris, obviously collecting the pieces is the first part of the task, but then figuring out a way to fit them all together, right? The next part of the task, and maybe arguably just as difficult.
It's a nice problem to have, and I think last year, I don't know, part of our lengthy discussion in the offseason is just how much, the lack of juice that you had last year with your team and yards after the catch and just speed and just explosiveness and all those things. I think you've tried. I thought it was interesting because Joey's had this little priority list of okay, what needs to happen for our team to ultimately achieve their goals. And a lot of these things we have touched on. And it was the offensive line needs to make a jump, which we agree. This is a giant blinking light on this position group, especially with your left tackle kind of starting out a bit dinged up and all that. And he's in hand in hand with that is QB health. Okay, so we know that's an obvious. The other was the youth in the secondary, which we touched on in yesterday's show. But with that, it's our offensive skill needs to be what we think it can be. Okay, so that was, you can rank them however you want, and I'd probably put the offensive skill not as big of a deal as what your offensive line making a jump in the QB health, obviously. However, they knew they needed to upgrade this. Well, you did on paper and otherwise, and so you've got some guys that want to be fed, and now it's a matter of, okay, we got this dude, in the backfield that he's got a ton of street cred. He's got all these yards. We need to get him touches. But now we've got some other folks that we need to feature and really include because they've got some of the things that we were missing. Micah Hudson, Josh Kelly, I think Coy Aiken's going to really emerge here, Caleb Douglas, all those guys. But then there's this group of tight ends. And as we've touched on, the tight ends are a group that maybe would tilt more toward the pass catcher as opposed to just straight run blocker, okay? And I think, but it's going to be a task for a guy like Zach to, Dre McCray we haven't mentioned, Jordan Brown who's got some juice to him, and so but everybody can't have, 8 to 10 catches a game. It's just not how it works. The beauty of what Zach learned under Cliff, and people can agree with this or not, and I would say that back in the day, like I always use the Nebraska example. When Nebraska was really good, they were running the option. They could just tell you, hey, dude, we're going right. I'm either the QB is going to keep it or I'm pitching it to like Lawrence Phillips, and off to the races we go. And you couldn't do anything about it. What Cliff was really good at is like he would have enough in his offensive playbook to where I'm going to pick apart the weakness. So one team may be really good at corner. Well, okay, then let's really punish them in the run game or the slot or over the middle if we can't take those shots down the field. And so you want enough toys to where you can really kind of go at it to where let's attack their weakness. And so one week it may be different than others. And so you hope that there's enough chemistry and enough togetherness here to where guys are going to have to understand I may be featured one week and not quite as much the next. But it's a challenge. And when you've got NIL involved and you got these other things, it's like, dude, I didn't show up here for this. So there's a lot to try to manage here. It puts a lot of pressure on the play caller, the QB, the head coach, try to keep, because, receivers are always open. Tight ends are always open. Throw me the damn ball, right?
I'm trying to think back and please toss one in if I'm missing it somewhere, but to a group of offensive skill position players that I really felt like was comparable to what this one could be. Now we're still sitting here in on paper time of year, hadn't played a game yet, so we'll wait and see how this one works out. But I feel like it's been a little while since there has even been that potential to have such a crowded room. And I'm kind of going back. I mean, this is over a decade now, but I'm thinking of like DeAndre Washington, Amaro, Grant being on the field at the same time. And some of those guys, is there a group I'm kind of missing between that time and now, or is this a fairly special group again, as we sit here on paper, compared to some of those otherwise in eras gone by?
That's a great group to reference, and that, boy, I hope it's like that group, because there's a bunch of NFL guys in that group, and I wish you had a LaRaven Clark at left tackle or offensive tackle in general to go with it. He was also an NFL guy in that era. But yeah, I don't know, because I generally and I mentioned to you like the Senior Bowl watch list. I think that is something that, look, we can talk about stuff. We can look at PFF rankings and we can look at prospect rankings or who wanted these players. When all three of those tight ends are on a group like that, and you have a bona fide guy at running back, I mean, this is fair, and this isn't, take our word for it, but just look at what the NFL folks are thinking, or the folks that are in charge of the next level of putting guys in those positions to be on the radar, because I think that's legit. Josh Kelly, same thing. And because you've got some, and that's the difference here, is that why are we so high on some of these guys when they haven't done a thing here? Well, they've done it at other Power 4 schools, and there's a lot of experience here. And then you factor that with the NFL folk, like what they see, and there's kind of, so it all kind of equals a lot of possibilities and a lot of fun. And again, I would say it needs to be. Not everybody we've talked about is going to have a monster year. Guys are going to get dinged up. But if there's enough hits in this mix, and we're not even talking about the true freshman, which I think he's catching footballs one-handed out there at day one of practice, and just the ball skills and all those things. And it's funny because, I mean, you got guys like Dre McCray and Jordan Brown and Coy Aiken that are almost kind of, this isn't, or Mason Tharp even, semi under the radar just because they have been here. Those are the guys that a lot of times, those are the ones that take the biggest steps because they've been here and being developed under the same coaches and same system and all that. And we have a tendency to like focus on the new pieces too much. But when you've got new pieces like a Josh Kelly and a Conyers that have done it and were wanted by so many programs and all that, it's like it's easy to expect some legit numbers and some juice right out of the gate. And I think we'll get some of that for sure.
Well, and I I know there have been good players that have come through Texas Tech since the group I referenced, but I'm really thinking in a group context, like Izakanma, really good player. I don't know if he had some of the other options around him that gave him even more opportunities.
Antoine Wesley.
Antoine Wesley is the other name on my list.
Kiki Kuti was these are NFL folks. These are, but it's kind of like, okay, you hand the baton off to him. Okay, then you go be the guy. And now, granted, in the last couple of years, you haven't had that person. You haven't had an alpha, a dude. And hopefully you've got a couple of 3 or 4 now. And we'll see kind of who emerges. But, yeah, there's lots of possibilities here. But Zach would always want this pressure. I got a lot of mouths to feed. But that's a lot better than, dude, I've got all this ribeye here, and I don't have anybody to give it to.
I got nobody to feed. Yeah,
yeah, that's right. No, so this is a good problem.
Well, and of course, as we talked about on a prior episode, having some of those guys that could be dudes, could really be focal points for a defense, obviously would stand to reason it would open up some opportunity for some of those others as well that we've mentioned along the way. I wanted to ask you about one thing that Coach Kittley said, and just your take on how you interpret that. For the layman like me, prioritizing matchups or talking about priority matchups. Does that kind of speak to what you were already sort of describing as far as being versatile and attacking a defense based on maybe where the defense's strength or weakness is, or how would you kind of break down that thought? First, today's episode brought to you by eBay Motors, and eBay has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and keep that ride or die ride on the road, or elevate your car's game to the next level of performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, accessories of all kinds to fit your style, whether it's speed, power, or design you're into. eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts to perfectly fit what you need. Just head over to ebay.com/motors, where you'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and at no risk because of eBay's guaranteed fit. Your part is guaranteed to fit just right every time, or your money back, keeping you burning rubber and not burning cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to keep your ride or die on the road and moving your life forward at ebay.com/motors. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions do apply. We're talking about priority matchups. Does that kind of speak to what you were already sort of describing as far as being versatile and attacking a defense based on maybe where the defense's strength or weakness is, or how would you kind of break down that thought?
You try to find the vulnerability. You use motion and personnel groups to try to get what you want and exploit. So you get Conyers matched up against somebody much smaller or slower. So you get Micah Hudson matched up against somebody bigger that can't cover him, and and again, that's why you use a lot of motions and personnel groups and all these kinds of things. So you can, try to take advantage of some of that. But that's how Zach learned under Cliff. And that's what Cliff was really good at. It wasn't because people talk about bread and butter or what's your offensive base. And it's kind of like what Tim DeRuyter talks about at times, like we're multiple. Well, offensively, you kind of want to be the same. We want to be balanced, but we may attack this position group or this area of the field on defense different weeks, depending on what they trot out there and who's healthy and available and who's rolling for us and this and that. And but you got to have those pieces to be able to exploit them. And last year it was like, we don't really we want to throw it. We know we can run it a bit, but we can't really play that game as much. We're kind of grinding. We're trying to manufacture offense and all these things, but maybe it comes a little more naturally this year where you can really take shots down the field, but you can also hit teams underneath. You can hit them in the slot. You can really play the grinded out game or the explosive game. Because 2 years ago, it was not that you were all world on offense, but one of the most fascinating things about 2 years ago, the way you ended that season, is you go to Iowa State and you win a game 14-10. Ball control, grind it out. You're in the elements, 0 degrees. It's nighttime. There's not a lot of offense there. We got to get our punter involved and play field position. The very next week, you beat Oklahoma 52-49 or whatever it was, and you open it up and you exploded. That's what the matchup dictated. And you've got to be a Swiss Army knife and got to be versatile in today's era of college football. And so I think he's speaking to that, and certainly not a problem by any means. But again, there's some stress involved and some chemistry and some, putting your arm around a guy after a game when he only got 2 targets as opposed to his buddy got 8 to 10 targets. I mean, that's just kind of part of the deal. But hopefully the Red Raiders are the ones that benefit, like the group in total. And, we'll just kind of have to see.
Before we move on to Jalen Conyers specifically, is there any heat to Zach Kittley's seat? Because I know there's been some disappointment, but there's also been, layer upon layer of issue with the quarterback and keeping them healthy. And what do you think about that part of it? Because I don't think he would say that they've been the offense he wants them to be. And I bet a lot of Tech fans would say they haven't quite, at least consistently, been the offense that they would like to see. But it's a little more complicated of a conversation, I think, than just, hey, they didn't get it done. They weren't any good. When you're playing 3 or 4 quarterbacks in a season, obviously that makes a difference.
I could see where, fan base would be frustrated. Again, we're spoiled around here, and there's an expectation. And Zach would be the first one to tell you, point out all the issues and point at himself as well. Internally, I don't believe there's any sort of hot seat whatsoever. I think that, at some level, Zach gets credit for figuring out the run game last year. Taj deserves some credit too, and some of the offensive line and all that stuff. At some point, it can't all just be, well, he gets all the credit for 15. At some point, being able to pivot and redefine who you are. Yes, I think all involved would have wished it would have happened sooner, but Peck, we were sitting here going, what's wrong with these receivers? We all thought that just that group would be a bit different. Jerron Bradley was a first-team All-Big 12 guy last year going into the season. Yeah. And like I'm saying with these other pieces, they all might not match what the expectation is because Bradley just did not. There was glimpses. At Kansas was a big one, and there were some other, times. But I just don't. I don't. And you can't just gloss over the QB thing.
No,
I don't care who's calling plays, who's standing over there, what scheme you're running, at what level you're at. When you get into your second and third quarterbacks in meaningful football against good opponents, it's just not. It's going to be a tough sledding unless you just are really lucky with dude, he was sitting over there on the bench and now he's like Iowa State did, like Rocco Becht, but I just don't believe there's any kind of hot seat there, and the expectation remains high. But we'll see now with some weapons what it looks like. But still, I would still even say, is the offensive line like it needs to be? Is that Zach's fault? I don't know. Those are lots of because you just switch that position coach. And you're recruiting to that, and there's a lot in the pipeline. It's just not quite, you stick that toothpick in the cake, and there's a little batter still coming out on the toothpick yet, so it's not quite done. But yeah, I hear the argument. I certainly understand it, and that'll be something we talk about as the season goes along for sure.
Okay, didn't know that Chris Level had a baking background, but a little baking knowledge kicked out for you as well.
Cindy Level taught me that. I appreciate that.
There you go. Shout out to Cindy. Before we get out of here, let's get to one of the guys that I think is one of the most intriguing individuals that's going to be in red and black this year, and that is Jalen Conyers, the pride and joy of Groover, Texas. Probably a lot of folks wanted him to be a Red Raider the first time around. He transfers from Arizona State and didn't exactly have it cooking 10 of 10 out in Tempe. So I think there's got to be some motivation for him also to kind of reassert himself as the football player he was formerly thought to be, and to do it now back in West Texas. Really interested to see what this guy can do for the Red Raiders, and also interested to see the ways in which he is used by Zach Kittley, who I did forget to pass the message along to. Coach Kittley, we just want to make sure call the touchdown plays. If you need any advice, call the touchdown plays. But back to Conyers, Chris, let's take a listen. I want to get to a couple of thoughts from him. You had a chance to visit with him. First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. And summertime means baseball, burgers, and money in the bank when you're picking a winner with FanDuel. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone all summer long. So head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer by beating the heat with a refreshing parlay. an over-under play, or by getting the moneyline mojo working. Visit FanDuel.com and make a splash by adding a big win to your summer bucket list with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. At Texas Tech's local media day, and one of the comments I wanted to get to from Mr. Conyers was surrounding his decision to become a Red Raider.
Super excited. It was one of those things where, going into the portal, I kind of knew where I wanted to be. I had it narrowed down to really 3 places automatically. Wouldn't say I knew I was going to get offers from there, but knew, there's a high chance. And when it came down to it, when you're talking about coming back home and just being where you want to be and, getting to play in front of my family again, I think it was a no-brainer for me. And just in terms of the talent that we have here and, how much work we've put in going into the season and how great the roster looked, I couldn't say no to coming and joining Joey.
He mentions the roster, mentions some talent, so hopefully joining a train that's already got a little downhill momentum program-wise.
Yeah, and this individual or this particular situation really has a chance to work, and here's why. Because he really wanted to be here. I think several years prior, this is where this is fit, this is home. This is, I don't want to put words in his mouth and say dream school, but this is just a perfect situation for him. And I think that's why, because, Ruffin McNeil used to say this all the time. I feel like I've mentioned Ruffin McNeil's name on our show more than a few times. I love that dude. But he used to say, guys that really want to be, like Kerry Hyder was a perfect example back in the day. If they really like it here and want to be here, it's shocking how much better they play because they're happy. They're not 1 foot out the door or frustrated. And Conyers, I think, just checks all the boxes there because it just made too much sense. He's known Barron for a long time. Just that alone, and obviously the home part, and just West Texas in general. But you're right. It wasn't just all world at Arizona State. I think Jalen would tell you, some of the scheme didn't necessarily fit him. And there were some things going on at Arizona State too that they were kind of dealing with, and as I talked to Jalen too about, I'm like, Lubbock and Tempe are 2 vastly different scenarios as far as the trouble you can get into. I've been to Tempe many times. I said, dude, it probably takes a lot of discipline there in Tempe to kind of keep yourself out of trouble. He's like, yes, sir. Not that you can't get in trouble in Lubbock, Texas, but Tempe is dangerous now. I don't think I would send my either one or 2 of my children there in hopes of they were going to go get a quality education out in Arizona State. Just lots of possible distractions out there in Tempe. 2 hours away from Vegas, the sun is always shining, and it's just everybody's. There's a lot going on there. I'll just leave it.
The topography is always interesting.
That too. Yes.
On campus and off.
Yes, absolutely.
Conyers to me is somebody that I feel like represents a really unique package because of some of the ways that he was used at Arizona State and some of what we've heard about the ways in which he could be used at Texas Tech, whether it's sort of in the backfield as a quarterback or a wildcat quarterback or some of these things in between still remains to be seen. But you also talked with him about some of that versatility here again as Jalen Conyers.
I was a quarterback in high school, and we ran swinging gate a lot at Groover, like for 2-point conversion and stuff. So I remember them saying, like, did you ever play quarterback? I was like do this, that. And I was like, yeah. Like, okay, we're going to try it for a game. And I was like, oh, okay, like 1 or 2 plays. And like, no, we're going to do a full game of like you doing swing gate. I was like, oh, okay. And we ended up winning the game. So I'm actually I think I'm 1-1 as a starter. So I'll take that.
and I would tell you, as that conversation went along, there's a lot of possibilities about that being in the playbook this year. And he said to me, let's just imagine this: me on the balls on the 2-yard line, me and Taj Brooks running zone read. He goes, yep. I'll give that 100%. Success rate, on something like that, because you're tackling either 245 or whatever Taj weighs, 230, 235, whatever, or 260. And it's funny because I think Jalen has said to people before, he's like, people are very surprised at how quick I am and how light on my feet I am based on how big that I am. Because he's 265. He's just a big human.
Big boy. Yeah.
But it's the way he's kind of built and everything, he's not like overwhelmingly just this like hulk of a man, but he's just a large dude. But he's kind of built like a skill player, but he's just bigger than most. And I think that he surprises people with that. And I'm going to mention this name, and I don't want people to get it twisted, but I think Zach Kittley even has said that we can kind of use him like the Chiefs use Travis Kelce, the best tight end in the NFL. And what he means by that is in no way is he drawing the comparison that they are the similar player as far as talent and all those things. However, skill sets at their different levels and the ability to move them around and do different things, I think is very similar. Because if you watch the Chiefs, with Pat, and there's such a chemistry, they kind of line him up as it's like this H-back. He's a tight end. He's split wide. He's just kind of all over the place. And then the defense has to adjust. Okay, who's got him? Well, on this play, you have him here, or if he's lined out wide, I guess I got him if I'm the corner. There's all different kinds of – you're trying to confuse and create your matchups. And I think that Zach very much feels like that Jalen can be utilized in this manner where they always have to account for him because, do we want to rule out that he could ever throw a pass? But I definitely think he could take a snap. He's definitely going to catch it. And what Jalen will tell you, too, which I appreciated about him, and this is where the older part of these players comes into play. He admitted, I wasn't involved in a lot of the run game at Arizona State. I wasn't involved in those plays. So typically when I'm in, we're throwing it or I'm running Wildcat or whatever. I'm trying to be much more involved in the run game here. He knows his own weakness. He knows maybe what the criticism is. His challenge, I think, coming into this year is to be more well-rounded and be a guy that, we talk about in NFL-wise, like running backs, like he's a 3-down back because that means he can pick up the blitz, he can catch it. You don't ever have to take him off the field. And it's in college that with you got so many more players, you can be more specific with the skill set of a player. For example, Cam Dickey and Cameron Valdez, we kind of know, man, when those guys are in, maybe they're handing it to Cam Valdez, but maybe we're going to do something else with it and run a pass play or whatever that Cam Dickey, so you don't want to tip your cap. And so I think Jalen is trying to be tip your hand, I should say, not tip your cap. What am I doing? Sorry.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
It happens. I think Jalen, his challenge is in his last year is trying to be more well-rounded. He wants to be involved in blocking for Taj Brooks, basically, is what you hear him saying. Like, Coach, don't feel like you have to take me out if we're going to run the ball, and I appreciate that. But you will see him flexed out, lined up in the back. Just moved around quite a bit. And that's the fun part for a guy like Zach now that he's got some toys to play with that you can get a little more creative.
Man, can't wait to see it. And just the thought you mentioned when we were talking tight ends a week or two ago, just the thought of having two of those guys on the field at the same time, maybe occasionally three of those guys on the field at the same time is really exciting because I feel like that's an element that has been missing from a Texas Tech offense, at least on a consistent basis for quite some time. And I know as offenses evolved, maybe the tight end kind of fell out of fashion or something like that, but it's never out of fashion on this podcast. This is the Tight Ends podcast, Locked On Texas Tech, Locked On Tight Ends.
and Jason Llewellyn, another name to remember too. He caught a short touchdown pass in the spring game, and he's somebody that's kind of in that pipeline, maybe more of a blocker and things like that. But you've got some options there that clearly wanted to add depth and talent and versatility to that group, and boy, did they do it.
All right, man. Great stuff once again today, Chris. Appreciate the thoughts and perspectives. Hope you have a fantastic weekend. It's been a fun week as we got fall camp kicked open and still plenty more to come as we are just getting started. But now within a month of game number 1, just around the corner as ACU comes to town. Appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoyed it.
Happy August, everybody out there, to those who celebrate. And we'll talk to you next time, man. Have a good weekend, people.
Get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. Of course, the best way to help us grow the show is to comment anything below. So go on and dive in and mix it up. Thanks to those everydayers who are doing that regularly. And thanks to those making us their first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On Big 12, also on YouTube or anywhere you find podcasts. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks for being out there, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.